Film Threat is to introduce the audience, to different types of filmmakers to get direct access so they can have a conversation. Because at one time, every single one of these filmmakers that come to talk to us, they started as a fan. No one who goes into the movie business doesn't love movies. There's a movie that usually at a young age that kind of captures your imagination, that turns you into a film fan, that takes you down rabbit holes of either specific filmmakers or genres or actors or, different types of film franchises or types of storytelling like science fiction, fantasy, or horror. So I just love connecting our audience directly with filmmakers. And on that, our next filmmaker is the madman behind Terrifier 2. And all I'll say is this is the most over-the-top, horrific, gory film I have seen probably since Psycho Goreman, and it tops Psycho Goreman. Because Psycho Goreman could be argued as like it's partially a comedy. And while there are some comedic moments in Terrifier 2, this is an old school, like tip of the hat to the 80s gore fest like you've never seen. It's in theaters today. In fact, it's playing at the AMC Burbank 16, which is my local theater. I will find out if it's on demand or whatnot, but I'll tell you this, it also leaves nothing on the table and nothing to the imagination. It is a horrific story of a clown that may or may not be imaginary, that gains delight in dismembering and torturing victims. This is for hardcore gore horror fans. Okay. And we have the director with us, Damien Leone. Damien, thank you for joining us on the show. Good to see you. I noticed that you follow Film Threat on Twitter, so I followed you back. Thank you for being here.
Dude, thank you. This is an honor. I am such a fan of yours, man. This is unbelievable. Unbelievable. Thanks for having me, dude.
That's cool. Dude, whoa. This movie. And there's so many it definitely felt like, the movie may be set present day, but there's something about it that felt like a nod to the past, like 80s horror. What inspired this? What inspired Terrifier 2? Not just the story, but also just the look. And by the look, I mean, like, I was paying attention to like the decor in the kitchen, which made me laugh because it doesn't look like a modern kitchen,
Right. Oh my God. those are, listen, I was born in 84, but I still consider myself, I was like tapped into the Matrix very early on. Like I have memories from 2. My mother named me after The Omen and was obsessed with horror movies. So she showed me horror movies from the time I was like 2-3 years old. No joke. And it wasn't just horror movies either. It was like Jaws, but Commando, RoboCop, Rambo, Beastmaster, Red Sonja, which played a huge part in Terrifier 2 with my love for the Sienna character and where I took her. So, I have been watching horror movies since I'm a little kid and obsessed with 80s horror movies. And then I would say about the time I was 7, I was already obsessed with Jason, Freddy, Michael Myers, all the usual slasher suspects. And I would always rent VHS tapes. And when I had Friday the 13th Part 6, and at the beginning of Friday the 13th Part 6, they had the coming attraction to Tom Savini's Screen Greats, which was an hour-long documentary on the behind-the-scenes, him creating Jason and the Monsters and Creepshow. And when I saw that, like a light bulb went off. And because I was always already an artist, I would draw comic books and things like that. But when I saw him creating my monster heroes and things like that, I said, that's something I could really get into. And then a few years later, like 5 years later, when I was around 12, because I was still very young, I was like 7, but then 5 years later, I actually got to meet Tom Savini at a horror convention for the first time. I was super nervous, but he was so cool. And then someone else happened to be selling starter makeup kits and fake blood, mint-flavored fake blood, and somebody else was selling real machetes that were dulled, and they had the semicircle cut out, which is the classic Tom Savini gag. And my mother bought all this stuff for me, and when I got home, that was like the first day of the rest of my life. And I've been on that trajectory ever since. But yeah, man, it's wild.
Well, I don't think there's anything I can say that would prepare an audience well enough for this movie. I mean, it is like insane over the top. Like where I'm looking like, how did the actors stay in character long enough to even finish some of this stuff? Because the movie and this character that you've created, the clown, is horrifying. Like there's a scene at the beginning of the movie where there's a very bloody murder, and the clown just goes to a laundromat, nonchalantly takes all his clothes off, uh, washes them in the washing machine, and then goes about his merry way. But it's played so straight, it's like not for laughs, and you're like, am I supposed to laugh? I mean, the tone of this film is like it's nuts. And then of course you've got the hero, which the lead, I forget the lead character. She has the angel wings.
Yeah, no, played by Lauren Lavera.
Yeah. Oh my God, she's so good. And the movie takes place like during Halloween. So they're all in these Halloween costumes, going to a Halloween party. And she's dressed as like this warrior princess with angel wings. She's kind of dressed for battle,
Yes.
which is so great. So it's like, oh, there's a logical reason she's dressed that way. Right. It's actually perfect. And then that actress, there's a scene near the end of the movie where she's in this tank of water. And I was just like, and there's also like fire effects. I don't want to ruin too much of it, but like there are things where I'm like, oh my God, did anybody get hurt during some of these things? I mean, that must have been a concern, safety.
Sure. No, thank God we made it through without any issues. Thank God, because that's always a concern, obviously. But this was intense, man, and this was, it's a really low budget movie. It's when people finally, I mean, I don't know if it's smart to talk about budgets and things like that, but we had a very, very low budget, and it was a lot of work. It took us, I told my cast and crew it was going to take 3.5 months, I figured, because this was an ambitious movie, and that's a long time. And it wound up taking almost 3 years to make this movie, just because of so many obstacles thrown at us. For the first time in my life, because I do all the makeup effects, and for the first time, I knew this movie was so ambitious, and there was no way I was going to be able to create all these. So I wanted to hire another makeup team for the first time to take like 40% of the burden off, and they wound up bailing out because of budget, and we couldn't come to an agreement like a month before we started shooting, and now I was really behind. And I told my producer, Phil, I said, what are we going to do? Do we postpone? He said, we can't keep postponing. We'll never make this movie. We just got to jump in and figure it out. So there was a lot of stop and go. We'd have to film up to a point. If a kill scene came up, we'd have to break, and Phil would be my makeup assistant. So I took over all the effects again, and we'd have to take a week or 2 weeks to build these effects and then continue shooting. And that's how it went over the course of a little over 2 years or something like that. So it was wild, but man, I mean, I don't know if we like talking about spoilers or anything, but there is one big kill scene in this movie that most people know what it is. It's like at the halfway point. It takes place in a bedroom, and that took us. We actually shot it for 2 days before we got hit with the pandemic, and I knew it was not coming out to my liking. The effects were because there's a sort of infamous now hacksaw scene in Terrifier 1 that everybody talks about. It's very graphic. And the fans of this movie want us to sort of rival that. It's all we hear. It's like, oh my God, Art the Clown and the hacksaw scene. How are you going to top the hacksaw scene? So I knew going into this, we had to come somewhere close. So I found this image in a book of Jack the Ripper, one of his victims. And it was so disturbing that I said, my God, if we can touch that. It was one of his victims on a bed, just so horribly mutilated. You couldn't even tell it was a human being anymore. I said, if we take that and sort of reverse engineer it, and that's one of Art's victims, we show how this person could possibly end up in that state, that might be interesting. So that was the mindset going in. But I knew I wasn't feeling what we were doing. It wasn't coming anywhere near the hacksaw scene. And then when COVID hit us and we were forced to just break, I said, this gives us an opportunity to reconfigure this entire kill scene. And I started it from scratch, and Phil and I built all of these effects that turned this scene into like a 2-minute and 40-second kill scene that's pretty graphic and insane, especially the fact that it's playing in theaters. And it's not rated. I mean, a lot of people just walking in really not knowing what to expect, and when they see that scene, it's pretty wild. It's quite an experience. Yeah.
Well, we have a lot of questions and comments in the chat. Do you mind like going to the chat? And looks like some people have already seen the film. CD Stein 69 says this was amazing as a horror film. Goober says gore on gore. Nice collection, Damien says Furred to the Future. Horror Punk says hail Damien Leone.
Crazy.
And Patrick Lemire says, what a mom. For your mom, that story you told. And Alan Horkin says coulrophobia equals a fear is a fear of clowns. And Zaven says, sounds like there's no CG in this movie. I think there might have been one shot I noticed, like it was a CG enhanced, but all the gore effects are not, it's all real, it looks like to me.
So if I could, I mean, I'm happy to talk about this stuff because I'm proud of it and it's cool. Like, so it is like 99% practical, all the gore, but there are these little tricks that we did. Like, for instance, there's a scene where I guess we can just go into this, bro. I mean, that one thing that happens to that woman in the room and she winds up a mutilated corpse on a bed and it's a dummy. I mean, it's just that I built a silicone replica of her. And I wanted the audience to believe that this was a dummy. I mean, like, it can't possibly be the actor anymore. It's so horribly mutilated beyond recognition. But then it wakes up, and I really wanted that to shock the audience. So it was made a very kind of crude way because I don't know anything about animatronics, but I knew I could turn this into a rod puppet since it was a set. I had people under the bed operating it, just like a tubes in the chest, making it breathe. But what we did with CGI was once she wakes up, I had like her eyeball open. So we had the actress's real eye CGI'd onto that. And when she says mom, you know, that's another fake head, but that's a CGI, you know, the eyeball is put on. And then there's a decapitation scene in the middle where we did the same thing. We had this wonderful head that we built with all these blood pumps and all this, you know, gore and meat and bacon and whatnot inside. But then we digitally put the actor's face on it. So when it's getting severed, you can get the reactions and you can see the mouth twitching and the eyes blinking, and it's kind of really unsettling. So I love that marriage of practical to enhance the digital to enhance the practicals. It's something that Guillermo del Toro does beautifully. You know, the first time I ever saw that so effectively done was in like Pan's Labyrinth, when the general or whatever gets his cheek slit open and you're looking inside his mouth and it's like, oh my God, that's just like, you can't do that with practical effects. So yeah.
Are you ever afraid of going too far, or do you ever think about going too far in that NC-17 category? Or,
yeah, for sure. I mean, not that I'm aiming to ever get an R or anything like that. Especially like I've never even had to deal with that because my movies have been so low budget. They never had to be presented to the MPAA or anything like that. But I do love pushing the boundaries as far as I can go. But I do still try and walk a fine line of accessibility, and I don't want to alienate everybody. Even though I know this is already very extreme, perhaps for a lot of people. But when I think of a scene and I write a scene, I imagine 5 steps further I could take it. And then I say, oof, that's way too far. We're going to really just alienate everybody. And I don't want to fall into that category. And it's another reason why there's such a heavy fantasy element in this movie. So hopefully that can ease people into the graphic violence where you walk away saying, you know, this isn't Henry Portrait of a Serial Killer. It's clearly, you know, steeped in fantasy, and we're not supposed to take this, you know, that seriously. Hopefully that's where I'm coming from. Yeah.
We got a lot of questions and comments here. X McDouchey McX says, my hat's off to you, Damien. That shit was pure filth. CD Stein 69 says, saw it last night in the theater, had a little feel of Elm Street 3 with a perfect fitting soundtrack that had 80s synth vibes. For this one, what were your inspirations exactly?
That is a blatant inspiration, Nightmare on Elm Street 3. There's actually little montages in the movie that are, you know, straight homages to that. Like the opening credit sequence in Nightmare on Elm Street, Patricia Arquette's building the house, and it's intercut with the credits. In this, Sienna's building her costume, and that's intercut with the credits. I mean, just that heavy fantasy element that we were, you know, weaving in dreams, and you didn't know when dream was reality, and vice versa, things like that. So huge influence. That's one of my favorite horror movies of all time. That's actually, it might be my favorite of the franchise. I mean, it's tied with Part 1, but they're neck and neck for me. I love them both equally.
Also, Art the Clown is getting a lot of love in the chat. Sick Class of 1984 poster, bro.
Thank you.
Which is great. Oh my God, we just have, this is crazy. 99. Let's see. X McDouchey X. The practical effects was absolutely disgusting. There was a couple that left the theater midway. Fucking glorious. Scott says 99% practical, 100% sick.
That's cool.
Yeah, and then there was a comment here earlier. I'm trying to find it about your favorite. Here it is, Goober. What's a favorite movie that's behind you? Like you have obviously have a great collection there. Favorite film from your shelf there?
I mean, my favorite movie of all time is Jaws, so I would have to say that. Yeah, just leave it there. I can go on. We could turn this whole thing into a Jaws rant.
That's awesome. And let's see. Art the Clown is what horror needs these days. Hell yeah. And then did you do all the practical effects yourself, says Horror Punk?
I did. I did. I would say 99% of them. My assistant, Phil, my producer, Phil Falcone, who is the only reason why Terrifier exists, because nobody ever believed in it or wanted to give me money when it was just Terrifier. So he was the first guy to say, yeah, you know what, dude, I'll give you the money. He's like, I just want to. He's not even a horror fan, which is hysterical. He still isn't. But he just had recently got into filmmaking, and he wanted to learn to do special effects, or at least just hang out with me, be by my side while I was doing it. And he's still my assistant now to this day. And he was the one who just helped me through Terrifier 2. And he got really good at making molds, and he mixes the silicone with me. I even let him sculpt some things. But aside from that, maybe there were a couple of other days where I had my friend Alana Rose come in. She was actually on Face Off, and she painted Sienna's costume, and she helped me mold some people and things like that, painted a couple of body parts. But I really did 98% of all the effects in the movie.
Manuel Munez says, saw Terrifier, the first movie this weekend. It was awesome. Horror Punk says, my wife and me are obsessed with Art the Clown. Whoa.
Yeah, I'd like to ask one of the questions that's in the chat, but working with Chris Jericho, what was that like? I know he's a big horror fan.
Amazing, dude. It was so surreal. I would hear from friends all of a sudden, because I still have so many friends who are huge wrestling fans. And they would say, dude, I was listening to Talk is Jericho, and he just mentioned Terrifier and Art the Clown. And I was like, wow. And I knew, because I was actually watching wrestling a lot around like 2005 and stuff like that. And he was like, you know, he still is huge, but I mean, he was really famous then. So I knew exactly who Chris Jericho was. So I said, oh my God, that's friggin' insane. And then he wound up getting in touch with David somehow, who plays Art the Clown. And he got in touch with me, and he said, dude, you know, huge fan. I love what you're doing. He's going to be the next face of horror. He said, if you ever make a sequel or something, I'd love to be involved somehow. And I was like, oh my God, are you kidding me? I'll totally do that. So I wrote him this little part, and he's in the end of the film. And he just flew down, and we spent 2 days shooting, and he was such a cool guy, man. Makes you feel at ease immediately, and he's a huge horror fan. So it's great.
You got some, the comments are coming in faster than we can keep up. Fourth 1000 for 10 says, Terrifier 1 offended my mother-in-law, my girlfriend. The kids were ushered out of the living room. Had to finish it later in the night alone. From the bottom of my cinema heart, thank you for this.
My pleasure. Thank you, man. Always down to offend people.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And then CD Stein 69 says, if you had a chance to do an established horror IP, obviously other than Jaws, what would it be, and where would you go with it?
Oh, easy. One of my dreams would be to direct Friday the 13th, a Friday the 13th reboot, because Jason's always been one of my biggest slasher heroes since I'm a kid. You know, look, I would like to make him scarier if possible. Not just like brute strength and violence, which obviously would be a huge part of it. He would have to be just a relentless axe murderer in this. And I would also love to set it back in the early 80s. I think would be amazing. Get rid of cell phones, get rid of that headache and all that, and keep it pure, but scarier and very graphic. Very graphic.
We got these comments are great here. Here we go. Let's see. Art the Clown is the best horror icon since the 80s icons. Oh, that's awesome. So Mariusz says, oh, fuck it. Gonna watch it tonight. Love Damien's passion and story.
Oh, thank you.
So, and Scott asks, What does your mom think of your movies?
This is funny, actually. All right. So my mother, like I said, she was the one who introduced me to horror movies, all these cool movies. And she had to make a lot of sacrifices because it wasn't easy, having me live in that house. Like, I destroyed every piece of furniture she had and every bit of grout in her bathroom from the time I was 12 years old, playing with fake blood. I mean, you name it. It was not easy. So at some point, I'm always trying to please her and make her proud with these movies. And she does still love horror movies, and she watches more new movies and action movies and stuff than I do to this day. But when I had a rough cut of Terrifier 2, and I was so excited to show it to her. So I went to her apartment, and it was her and my aunt, and I set up my computer, and I sat in the back on the couch, and I watched them watch it, and they didn't know, and I was filming their reactions. And he was literally just cursing me out through the entire movie, just covering her eyes, turning away, and just saying, "What is wrong with you? Oh, nobody's gonna watch this. Nobody. This is way too far. Way too far. What happened to you? What you know what I mean? Like, all these things." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, "You're the one who did this to me." I'm like, "Aren't you happy? Aren't you proud? You know how much work went into this?" And she was like, she's like, "I'm proud of you. It was good, but you lost me." She's like, "At some point, this isn't for me anymore." So it's kind of a badge of honor, but I'm also kind of sad. But she did sit through it twice. We just had the New York City, our red carpet premiere with the cast and crew, and she did come down for that. So, and she was still covering her eyes and making noises and stuff. So, yeah.
Well, I got some more comments here. Horror Punk says, "Thank you, Damien, for bringing practical effects back to horror and showing the industry how it's done." Sifax says, "Rare that sequels look better than the first, but Pearl was better than X. Now Terrifier 2 looks better than the first two. Good job." And Fur to the Future says, "Do we have to watch Terrifier 1 to know the story?"
I would say actually you don't, because they pretty much recap everything in part 2. So I already ran into people who've seen when we were at Fantastic Fest. This guy came up to me and said, "I never saw the first one." I jumped right. He's like, "I loved everything about it." He's like, "Now I'm going to go back and watch the original." But he had no problem watching it. So
I would agree. I haven't seen the first, and the second one, yeah.
Okay, see?
You get what you need. You get what you need to get.
Yeah, the first one is so simplistic. That was one of the big criticisms of part 1, was that it really didn't have a story or protagonist you could really get behind, sympathize with, empathize with. And, it kind of was a showcase for Art the Clown, because I knew we really had to just swing for the fences, get him out there, and hopefully people grabbed onto him and gravitated toward him. But going into part 2, I say, like, we got into the club, like, it's like the bouncer let us in, but now it's like, all right, there's the dance floor. You got 5 minutes or whatever. It's like, hit it, show us what you're made of. And I really wanted to grow as a filmmaker, and I take all those criticisms to heart. I read everything. I'll go through every YouTube video, letterboxd reviews, you name it. I want to know what's not working or what could be improved upon, if I could rectify something. So I took so much time really focusing on the heroes, especially Sienna in this movie. I really wanted people to be on her side during this journey. So hopefully it worked.
Glanuccio says, "The way you just describe how you'd reboot Jason, please give this man the rights, and I want to be involved." X McDouche X says, "Sienna is the perfect female protagonist. She got the shit beat out of her and still had gravitas to push forward and showed how fucking strong she was." And then Scott says, "With a name like Damien Leone, how could you not be an awesome horror director?" And he also goes on to ask, "Does Damien have kids? Have they seen his films?"
I don't have time. I've been, Terrifier 3 for 3 years. Oh my God, it's not easy. I've been living in Terrifier world for so long, but I would show them this movie at, I don't know when exactly. I mean, when people say, that your kid's too young or something, I totally get that. I mean, I'm not advocating that you should show your 3-year-old or 4-year-old, the movies I was shown at a young age. But it didn't turn me into a real serial killer. But I do make movies like Terrifier. But
And then let's see. He goes on to say, "Is Art the Clown a metaphor for the brutality of the filmmaking process?"
It could be. It could be. And I'm going to take that and run with it. I'm going to say yes. That's what I had in mind all along. It's a lot, working on many layers here.
And Solomon Thornton says, "Damien, for your next film, please bring in The Undertaker."
I said, well, I got the Jericho connection. Might be able to make that.
Brock Samsonite, will you be paying homage to killer clowns from outer space at all?
I don't think so. I love that movie so much. That's another one of my childhood favorites. Yeah, who knows? I pay homage to so many things in my movies. I'm so proud of the movies that have influenced me that I love just giving nods to them wherever I possibly can. I mean, there's like blatant nods to Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Halloween 1 and Part 2. I mean, they're all over the place. So.
And just a couple more questions we'll get through. No one in the chat asks, any chance of you directing another remake of The Omen? Damien.
Never been asked, but I would love to. I'd be open to it for sure, man.
And Horror Punk, who is a fan, says, is there an official site to get Terrifier merch?
Yeah, terrifierthemovie.com, and also Terror Threads has a really awesome designs, shirts and things. Yeah.
Well, Art the Clown is a new icon. You officially have the most over-the-top, gore-filled horror film of the year that is a must-see for Halloween. I'm telling you, put this on Halloween. It'll clear the room. It'll clear the room. You're going to find out who the real horror fans are. I'm telling you. So it's in theaters now. It's coming. Is it coming to video on demand soon? Or
it is. It's going to go to, I don't know the exact date. I believe it is the 21st. It goes to Screambox, which is sort of like a Shudder. So it's exclusively to Screambox after the theatrical release. And then it's also around the holidays. I believe it's going to hit physical media, and there's going to be a 4K and a steelbook and things like that. So, I'll be posting that stuff on Instagram and Facebook and everywhere.
And a couple final comments. Andrew Aterno says, I'm stoked on the future of horror. It's coming back and it's being taken seriously. Very exciting. And hail, Damien. Thanks for dropping by, says Fur to the Future. Awesome. We appreciate it. Damien, thank you so much for coming by the Film Threat Livecast. You got to be back to talk Terrifier 3.
Dude, thank you so much. You have no idea how often I watch all of your videos, dude. I love where you're coming from, the way your passion for movies, and the way you deconstruct everything. Brilliant, dude. You have such a big fan here. So thank you, man.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much. The chat loves you. Congrats on the film Terrifier 2. It's at the AMC Burbank 16. If you're in Southern California, see it in a theater. See and count the people that walk out and then post it on social media. Damien, thanks so much. Have a great rest of your weekend.
Thanks, guys. Likewise.
Yeah. Later. Bye-bye. What a great guy. It was awesome.
And that was a rough movie to get through too.
Yeah, it was. No, dude, I love
relentless.
Sienna, the lead. That's what's cool. Like, she was such a great. The woman who's the lead in it is so good. You're just so convinced, and she's great. She also just seems more real. That's what I like, is just more realistic feeling. You can see her right there at the very bottom, right there. That's her. You can see in the graphics, she's dressed for Halloween and then suddenly trying to be murdered. So she's being attacked by a murderous clown, and she's just in her Halloween costume, which happens to be a warrior.